Another important element of effective writing is being clear and concise and using precise words. And again, this is an issue that you can address after a rough draft, which is why we're having this discussion now between the rough draft and the final draft. If your rough draft is the draft that you write for content, the final draft is the polished draft, where you move from merely content to style, to making sure that your essay coheres, as I discussed in an earlier video. Now making sure that your wording is clear and concise. And this takes some practice, but I'm going to give you some tips, some easy things that you can look for in your essay that will help you work toward clear, concise, and precise language. This is Ernest Hemingway, a very famous American author who was known for his brevity. He was known for a writing style that some might say was sparse, but one of the things that Hemingway always was able to do is to communicate in clear, precise language. And so he gives us some tips. One is to use vigorous English. Use words that actually mean something, not filler words. You have a word count in here, but that's for you to fill up with evidence, not for you to fill up with the words that really don't mean anything. Words like I think, or phrases like I think, I feel, I believe. Well, of course, you wouldn't be writing it if you didn't. So there's no place for those types of phrases. You also should use active verbs, verbs that do things. And so avoiding the be verb, am, is, are, was, were, is a good way to make sure you're using active verbs. The do verb tends to be a catch-all verb, and that's another verb you need to pay attention to. Now, you don't have to completely eliminate the be verb and the do verb from your writing, but just highlighting the use of them and working to change using them too many times to using more active, concrete verbs. Likewise, use concrete nouns. Be as specific as possible in nouns. One of the words to watch out for is the word thing or things. Thing or things can be anything. So scan your essay, look for those words, and then exchange them for a concrete noun. Similarly, the word stuff, okay? Same kind of thing. It should not be in your writing. Avoid jargon and cliche. Don't use jargon that is specific to a group because your writer won't know what you're talking about. Likewise, a cliche such as busy as a bee, raining cats and dogs. Those are cliches that don't mean anything specific. They are not unique to you. So get rid of them and replace them with what you actually mean. Yes, you might have to work a little harder, but your writing will be, as Hemingway says, vigorous, and thus more interesting and more effective. And this is one of my favorite quotations in thinking about writing and writing in this vigorous way. Vigorous writing is concise. A sentence should contain no unnecessary words. A paragraph, no unnecessary sentences. This requires that every word tell. that every word means something. So I'm not saying sacrifice examples, sacrifice evidence. No, 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 no. But let's start recognizing and getting rid of ineffective verbs and nouns. So I want to talk about two verbs, and I mentioned them just a minute ago, that you need to actually go through your essay sentence by sentence and mark down, highlight, whatever, when you use these words or versions of them. So the be verbs, which am, is, are, was, were. Underline, circle, highlight every place in your essay that you use these words. And go through those sentences and see if you can replace that be verb and restructure your sentence in order to use an action word. Likewise with do. We like to do everything. We do our homework, right? But that's not what that's not the action that's happening with our homework. Okay? We like to do crossword puzzles, but that's not really the action that's happening. So look for this word and again, replace it if you can. Now you won't be able to eliminate all of them, nor am I asking you to. It is just a really good way of making your writing stronger, avoiding an overuse of these vague verbs. So here is an example. David Siddharthas's essay is about his love-hate relationship with his family. So clearly I have an is right here. Doesn't seem like it's causing anybody problems, and it's really not. But what it does is it makes this sentence longer and a little bit less clear than it needs to be. So let's skip is out of here. And it's really simple to do. Name what the essay specifically does. Instead of just is about, it focuses on. Okay? So all we're doing is replacing this be verb with a action word. Some doctors no longer believe that doing crossword puzzles can delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Here's our word that should be glaring at us. So what we do, we solve a crossword puzzle. So let's change doing to solving. These are real simple things for you as a writer to look at in your essay. Takes a little time, but it makes your writing so much more effective and so much clearer. All right, burying nuclear waste in Antarctica would be in violation of an international treaty. There's our be verb phrase. And look how we can replace all of these words with two. We could even replace it with one. Burying nuclear waste in Antarctica violates an international treaty. When Rosa Parks was resistant to, we can replace all this with one word, resisted. So we have our subject acting. We have vigorous English. So one of the things that if you notice all these be verbs in your essay, the easiest way to revise is to make sure you have a subject that is naming the person or the thing doing the action. In other words, that you have a subject that is actually acting. This is terrible The institution of the New Deal had the effect of reversing some of the economic inequalities of the Great Depression. Now, I've highlighted in red here phrases that we don't even need. And so let's make the New Deal our subject. The New Deal reversed some of the economic inequalities of the Great Depression. This is much clearer. And your job as a writer is to be clear. You don't want your really good evidence being lost in a bunch of unclear, unnecessary words. Same thing here. The use of pure oxygen can cause healing in wounds that are otherwise untreatable. Way, way too many words. So let's just say oxygen can heal, or oxygen heals. Make sure you use active verbs. Instead of the pumps were destroyed by a surge, well, let's name what destroyed the pumps. It was the surge, right? So the power surge destroyed the pumps. Again, just by identifying those be verbs, you can see the sentences that potentially need revision. The land was stripped of timber before the settlers realized the consequences of their actions. So we have was stripped, right? The settlers stripped the land before realizing the consequences of their actions. The debris was removed from the construction site. Well, heck, we don't even know who removed it. So as a good writer, tell the reader who removed it. The contractor removed the debris from the construction site. So again, these are just some easy ways to get rid of an overuse of the be verb, all right? Use concrete nouns. I talked to you about things and stuff. But also it's important to use as specific of a noun as possible. So instead of just saying music or symphony, well, let's be specific about which music we're talking about. And then I discussed things already. Other catch-all words: area, aspect, factor. Typically these you can get rid of as well. Name what they actually are. And I would add stuff. A career in city planning offers many things. Well, tell the reader what it offers. How about rewards? It could offer bad stuff, right? Headaches. So you've got to be specific. Avoid jargon and cliche. Endeavor, try, right? Strategize. I hear that word all the time. Why don't we just plan? Commence, we can start. Facilitate, help. Indicator, assign. Utilize, use. We think these jargony words make us sound smarter. Really, don't use a $5 word when you can use a 5-cent word. Your job is to be clear. Mayor Summers will commence his term of office by ameliorating living conditions in economically deprived zones. Wouldn't it be much clearer to the audience if the writer just wrote this? Mayor Summers will begin his term of office by improving living conditions in poor neighborhoods. This is clear, this is concise, this is to the point, this is obfuscatory. Be concise. Just as I want you to be on the high alert for be verbs and do and things, I want you to be on high alert for the words really and very. You don't always need these words if you're being redundant. You don't need very unique. Something is either unique or it's not. And you want to avoid these words if you're being lazy. Instead of saying, oh, he's really smart or very smart, why don't you go ahead and use the word brilliant or really pretty or very pretty? How about beautiful? So if we have this sentence, accepted by 5 colleges, Jackson seems to be facing a very difficult situation. Let's get rid of the very. We don't need it. It's clear by the context that this is a difficult decision. You're not bringing anything new to the table by using very. So just watch out for those. And 9 times out of 10, really and very can be eliminated and or exchanged for a better word, as in here, eliminated here, exchanged here for clearer, more concise writing. All right, so I'm giving you some really good sentence level tips for making your writing itself be more effective. Watch your be verbs. Watch your do verb. Avoid the use of the word things. Watch really. Watch very. Another is avoid beginning sentences with these types of constructions. There is or there are. It is or they are. Okay? We want to name specifically our subject. There can never be a subject, and it could be anything. So we want the reader to clearly know what we're talking about. Always lead with a strong, clear subject. It is necessary for Americans today to learn to speak more than one language. All right. Americans is the main actor in the sentence, okay? So let's make Americans the subject so we can get rid of this it is construction. All we have to do here is say Americans today should learn to speak more than one language. Okay? Here we have a there are. There can never be a subject. So what is doing all this orbiting of Jupiter? Well, these moons are. So we can fix this by saying 4 large moons and more than 30 small ones. Get rid of the that. Orbit Jupiter. So again, the revision that I made was to lead with my subject. Americans today should learn 4 large moons and more than 30 small ones orbit. Okay, so that's a lot. A lot for you guys to look at, but the more practice you get in identifying these in your writing, the more comfortable or the more you will find yourself not even using these imprecise words. And then a lot of times we use a really long word when a short one will do, particularly like there is no doubt that, and we can just say doubtless. The reason why is that we can just say because. Call your attention to the fact, point out, notify, remind. So just be wary of these types of long phrases when you can really use a more concise word. This shows the problem when, in a very exaggerated way, when you are not concise. This was an actual memo written to government employees in the United States during World War II. And this memo is asking these employees to do something. But it's very difficult to figure out what the employees are being asked to do. Such preparations shall be made as will completely obscure all federal buildings and non-federal buildings occupied by the federal government during an air raid for any period of time from visibility by reason of internal or external illumination. So you're the government worker that gets this. Do you know what in the heck to do? Chances are no. Maybe you can tease out some words that it involves federal buildings, air raids, and then something about lighting, okay? But how much easier would it have been if you had just gotten this? In buildings where they have to keep the work going, put something across the windows, okay? So this is the case. This is a very exaggerated but true case of how not being concise can be so confusing. So if you can cut a word out, do. These are a little bit more realistic. Painting the house purple in color will make it stand out from the many white houses in town. Well, purple is a color, so we don't need the in color. So painting the house purple. Campers should know how much wood is sufficient enough for a fire to burn all night. Sufficient and enough mean the same thing, so we only need one of these words. Dashing quickly into the street to retrieve the ball, the little girl was almost hit by a car. Have you ever seen anyone dash slowly? No, you can't. It's impossible. So we can get rid of the quickly there. So these are just some tips, things I want you to start looking at with this first draft of this essay and to continue to play around with in your writing for my class and for anything else you write. I think these are tips that will help make you a more effective writer on the sentence level.